The sledgehammer crashes into concrete as Sarah demolishes her backyard pool, each strike echoing years of financial struggle. But when flashing red and blue lights pierce the evening darkness, she drops the tool and stares in disbelief. Karen Whitfield stands behind two uniformed officers, her manicured finger pointing accusingly at the destruction. "Officer, she's deliberately flooding my basement and destroying my property value." Karen's voice cuts through the humid air like a blade. Sarah's hands shake as she realizes her nightmare neighbor has just turned a desperate financial decision into a criminal matter. What Karen doesn't know is that Sarah has been recording everything, and the real crime isn't what she thinks it is. The sledgehammer felt heavier with each swing, but Sarah Mitchell refused to stop. Sweat dripped from her forehead onto the concrete deck surrounding the pool that had once been her pride and joy. Now it was just another monthly expense. She couldn't afford chemicals, cleaning, the broken pump that would cost $3,000 to replace. "Come on," she muttered through gritted teeth, raising the hammer above her head. The decorative tile border cracked under the impact, sending azure fragments scattering across the patio. Each piece represented another dollar she'd wasted trying. To maintain a lifestyle that had crumbled along with her marriage, the divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. Derek had walked away with half of everything, including half the debt. But somehow Sarah felt like she'd gotten the worst end of the deal. The house payments, the utilities, the maintenance sit, all fell on her shoulders now. Her teaching salary barely covered the basics, and the pool had become a luxury she couldn't justify. Sarah Mitchell." The sharp voice cut through the evening air like nails on a chalkboard. Sarah's grip tightened on the sledgehammer handle as she turned toward the pristine white fence that separated her property from the Whitfields' immaculate lawn. Karen Whitfield stood at the fence line, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Even at 7 in the evening, she looked like she'd just stepped out of a country club lunch in pressed khakis, pearl necklace, and that expression of perpetual disapproval that had made Sarah's life miserable for the past 3 years. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Karen's voice carried that tone of authority she used when speaking to the landscapers or her housekeeper. Sarah set down the sledgehammer and wiped her hands on her old jeans. "I'm removing my pool. Karen, on my property, you can't just destroy a pool. There are regulations, permits required. The runoff could damage my foundation, flood my basement." Karen's manicured fingers gripped the fence posts. "This is completely irresponsible. I checked with the city. I don't need a permit to remove a pool, just to install one." Sarah had done her homework, spending hours on the phone with the building department. "And I'm not just draining it into the yard. I rented a pump to send the water to the storm drain." "That's not the point." Karen's voice rose an octave. "The property values, Sarah. Do you have any idea what this will do to our neighborhood's values? Some of us have investments to protect." Sarah felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest. Karen had been complaining about something every few months since she'd moved in, the grass being too long, the mailbox needing paint, the car parked in the driveway instead of the garage. Now, she wanted to dictate what Sarah could do with her own backyard. "My financial situation isn't really your concern, Karen." Sarah picked up the sledgehammer again. "I can't afford to maintain this pool anymore. It's my property, my decision." "Well, we'll just see about that." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Richard knows people at city planning. We'll see if your little demolition project is as legal as you think it is." Karen stormed back toward her house, her designer sandals clicking. Against the stone pathway that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly salary, Sarah watched her go, then returned to her work. She'd dealt with Karen's threats before. The woman was all bark and no bite, using her husband's connections to intimidate people, but rarely following through. The pool had been Derek's idea, originally. They'd saved for 2 years, taking out a second mortgage to pay for the installation. The kids had been so excited, Dima, splashing around with her friends every summer, Jake learning to dive off the deep end. Those had been good times back when the family felt whole and the future seemed secure. Now Emma was at college 3 states away, calling less and less frequently. Jake had chosen to live with his father in the new condo downtown, closer to his friends and the gaming setup Derek had bought to ease his guilt. The pool sat empty most of the year, collecting leaves and costing money Sarah didn't have. She'd tried everything else first, posted it on social media to see if anyone wanted to take over the maintenance in exchange for use, called pool companies to see about converting it to a garden bed, even considered just letting it go, but the city had regulations about abandoned pools being safety hazards. The fines would be worse than the maintenance costs. So here she was, sweating in the humid evening air, destroying the last remnant of her former life, one swing at a time. The pump hummed steadily in the corner, drawing the remaining water through thick hoses that snaked across the yard to the street drain. She'd calculated it would take another 6 hours to empty completely. Then she could start breaking up the concrete shell. A local contractor had agreed to haul away the debris for $800 money she'd borrowed from her sister, with promises to pay it back before Christmas. As darkness began to settle over the neighborhood, Sarah switched on the work lights she'd rented along with the pump. The backyard took on an otherworldly quality, shadows dancing across the partially demolished pool deck. She'd made good progress about a third of the decorative border was gone, exposing the steel reinforcement underneath. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister, Linda. "How's the demolition going? Need me to bring dinner?" Sarah smiled, despite her exhaustion. Linda had been her rock through the divorce, offering both emotional support and practical help. She was the only one who understood why Sarah had to do this herself, instead of hiring professionals she couldn't afford. Making progress, Sarah typed back, "Pizza would be amazing." She was just raising the sledgehammer for another swing when she heard the cars pulling into her driveway. Not one car, multiple vehicles. Sarah set down the hammer and walked around the side of the house, her work boots crunching on the gravel. 2 police cruisers sat in her driveway, their red and blue lights painting the front of her house in alternating colors. Behind them, Richard Whitfield's black Mercedes gleamed under the streetlights. Karen stood on the sidewalk, talking animatedly. Two uniformed officers, her hands gesturing wildly, toward Sarah's backyard. Sarah's heart began to race. She wiped her sweaty palms on her jeans and walked toward the group, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Excuse me, officers. I'm Sarah Mitchell. This is my house." The older officer, a heavy-set man with gray hair, looked up from his notepad. "Ma'am, we received a complaint about illegal construction activity. Your neighbor here says you're conducting demolition without proper permits and creating a flooding hazard." "That's not true." Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I checked with the building department. I have every right to remove my own pool." Karen stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "Sarah, honey, I know you're going through a difficult time, but you can't just destroy property without considering how it affects the rest of us. The water damage alone." "What water damage?" Sarah interrupted. "I'm pumping the water directly to the storm drain. Nothing is going onto your property." Yet Karen said ominously, "But when you break through that concrete shell, where do you think all that groundwater is going to go?" "Straight into my basement." That's where the younger officer walked toward the backyard, his flashlight beam sweeping across the work area. "Ma'am, do you have documentation showing you don't need permits for this type of work?" Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd called the city, but she hadn't thought to get anything in writing. It had seemed like a straightforward question with a clear answer. "I spoke with someone at the building department. They said I only needed permits for installation, not removal." "Who specifically did you speak with?" the older officer asked, pen poised over his notepad. Sarah tried to remember. It had been a woman, but she couldn't recall the name. "I don't remember exactly. It was last week." Karen made a soft sound of disapproval. "You see, she has no documentation, no proof that this is legal. She's just tearing up her backyard on a whim, with no consideration for the consequences." Richard Whitfield finally spoke up, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Officers, I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I've seen what improper drainage can do to foundations. Mrs. Mitchell may have good intentions, but this kind of amateur demolition could cause thousands of dollars in damage to surrounding properties." The younger officer returned from his inspection of the backyard. "It's quite an operation back there. Professional equipment, significant excavation already in progress." Sarah felt the situation slipping away from her. What had started as a straightforward property improvement was being painted as some kind of reckless. Linda arrived 20 minutes later with a pizza box and a bottle of wine. taking one look at Sarah's face before setting both down and pulling her sister into a fierce hug. "Tell me everything," Linda said, settling onto the couch while Sarah paced the living room like a caged animal. Sarah recounted the evening's events, her voice growing more heated with each detail. "She actually suggested I should sell the house, Lynn. Like I don't belong here anymore because I can't afford to keep up with their country club standards. That woman is a piece of work." Linda opened the wine bottle with more force than necessary. "But you said you have the whole thing on camera." Sarah's laptop sat on the coffee table, the security footage already queued up. She'd watched it 3 times, each viewing revealing new details that made her blood boil. "Look at this." Sarah hit play, and Karen's voice filled the room through the laptop speakers. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m., just as the police cars were pulling up. Karen stood on the sidewalk, but she wasn't waiting for the officers to approach her. She was on her phone, talking rapidly to someone. "Richard, they're here. Yes, I called them 20 minutes ago. No, she doesn't have permits. I made sure of that." Karen's voice was crystal clear, and her words were damning. Linda leaned forward. "Made sure of what?" Sarah paused the video. "Keep listening." Karen continued her phone conversation, apparently confident that no one could overhear. "I called the building department yesterday and filed a complaint about unpermitted construction. Mrs. Patterson, in permitting, is Richard's golf partner's wife. She made sure there's a flag on the property now." "Holy shit," Linda breathed. "She sabotaged you before you even started." Sarah nodded grimly. "It gets worse." The video continued as the officers approached Karen. She greeted them with that sweet, concerned neighbor voice she'd used earlier. But the camera had caught something the officers couldn't see. The satisfied smirk on her face when she thought no one was looking. "And look at this." Sarah fast-forwarded to the moment when Karen was speaking quietly to the officers after they'd finished talking to Sarah. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but the audio picked up fragments. ... property values dropping. ... knew she couldn't afford ... divorce ... probably. Desperate enough to do anything. Linda's jaw dropped. "She's painting you as some kind of unstable divorcee who's lost her mind." "There's more." Sarah's fingers trembled as she clicked to another file. "This is from last week. The new footage showed Karen and a man Sarah didn't recognize standing at the fence line, looking over into her backyard. They were examining the pool area, taking photos, making notes." "Who's that guy?" Linda asked. "I have no idea, but watch what they do next." The man pulled out what looked like a measuring tape, checking distances from the pool to the property line. Karen pointed to different areas of her own yard, as if showing him where water might collect or flow. "They were planning this," Sarah said. "She didn't just happen to be concerned about drainage. She's been building a case against me." Linda sat back, processing what she'd seen. "This is harassment. You need to take this to the police." With what, technically, she hasn't done anything illegal. She filed a complaint with the city, which is her right. She called the police when she thought I was violating building codes. She was looking over the fence from her own property. Sarah rubbed her temples. A good lawyer could argue she was just being a concerned neighbor, but the phone call could be explained away as her making sure she had grounds for the complaint before wasting the police's time. Sarah had been thinking about this for the past hour. Karen's smart, evil, but smart. Linda poured them both wine. "So what do we do?" Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Sarah Mitchell. This is Detective Ray Castellanos with the County Sheriff's Department. I understand you had some police activity at your residence this evening." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Yes, but that was just a neighbor dispute about permits. Ma'am, I'm calling because we received a follow-up complaint about potential fraud and property damage. I'd like to schedule a time to speak with you tomorrow." "Fraud," Sarah's voice quacked. "What are you talking about?" "Someone's alleging that you're deliberately damaging your property to file an insurance claim. They've provided evidence that you've been planning this for weeks." Sarah felt the room spin around her. "That's completely false. I'm removing my pool because I can't afford to maintain it. I'm sure we can clear this up quickly, ma'am. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning, say 10 o'clock? Sarah agreed and hung up, her hands shaking. "What was that about?" Linda asked. "She's escalating." Karen's not just trying to stop me from removing the pool, she's trying to destroy my life. Sarah stared at the security footage, still paused on her laptop screen. She's accusing me of insurance fraud. Linda was quiet for a moment, then stood up abruptly. I'll be right back. Where are you going? To do some research. Karen Whitfield thinks she can play games. Let's see how she likes it when someone plays back. While Linda disappeared into the guest room with her own laptop, Sarah sat staring at the footage. She'd been so focused on Karen's obvious manipulations that she'd missed something important. She replayed the section with the unknown man, watching more carefully this time. The man wasn't just measuring distances, he was taking photos with a professional-looking camera, and he spent a lot of time examining the Whitfields' basement window wells. Sarah zoomed in on his clothing and spotted a logo on his shirt. AquaGuard Foundation Specialists. A foundation specialist, Karen had brought in a professional to document potential water damage before Sarah had even started the demolition. Lynn, Sarah called out. I need you to look something up. Linda returned with her laptop and a grim expression. I was just about to call you over. You need to see this. Linda's screen showed the local real estate listings. There, prominently featured, was Sarah's address, or rather, the lot next to Sarah's address. The Whitfields had listed their house for sale 2 weeks ago, with a price tag that made Sarah's eyes water. $2.3 million, Linda said. The listing emphasizes the prestigious neighborhood, mature landscaping, and exclusive community feel. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. She's selling. That's why she's so concerned about property values. But here's the interesting part. Linda clicked to another tab. Look at the showing history. The house had been on the market for 6 months before being delisted, then relisted 2 weeks ago with a price reduction of $300,000. They couldn't sell at their original price, Sarah realized. They're desperate. And a neighbor with an abandoned pool demolition project doesn't exactly scream prestigious community. Linda's fingers flew over the keyboard. But wait, there's more. She pulled up the county tax records. The Whitfields took out a massive second mortgage 18 months ago. They're leveraged to the hilt on that house. Sarah studied the numbers. They need to sell. That's not just about wanting to upgrade, they're in financial trouble too, which explains why Karen's so desperate to stop anything that might hurt their sale prospects. Linda paused. But Sarah, if they're this desperate, they might be willing to do anything to protect their investment. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. What do you mean? I mean, maybe insurance fraud isn't the only crime someone's planning to commit. Before Sarah could ask what Linda meant, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop the demolition. Permanently, or there will be consequences. Your choice. Sarah showed the message to Linda, whose face went pale. We're calling the police right now, Linda said, and tell them what someone sent me, a vague, threatening text from a number that's probably untraceable. Sarah set down her phone. Besides, after tonight, I'm not sure the local police are going to be very sympathetic. Linda was quiet for a moment, then looked up with a determined expression. Then we dig deeper. But the Whitfields want to play dirty. Let's find out exactly how dirty they're willing to get. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about that foundation specialist Karen brought over. What if this isn't the first time she's manufactured a crisis to protect her property values? Linda's eyes gleamed. What if there are other neighbors who've had mysterious problems when they tried to do anything Karen didn't approve of? Sarah felt a spark of hope. You think she's done this before? I think someone doesn't spend $2.3 million on a house without learning how to protect their investment. And I think we need to find out who else in this neighborhood has tangled with Karen Whitfield and lived to tell about it. Sarah looked at the threatening text again, then at the security footage showing Karen's calculated manipulation. How do we do that? Linda grinned, and for the first time all evening, Sarah saw a glimpse of the sister who'd helped her toilet paper. The high school principal's house 20 years ago. We start with the neighbors. Someone in this pristine little community has to have a story about the Whitfields. And tomorrow, while you're dealing with that detective, I'm going to find them. But as Linda spoke, Sarah's laptop chimed with a new email notification. The sender was listed as concerned neighbor, and the subject line made Sarah's blood freeze. Evidence of fraudulent insurance claims. Sarah opened Th polo shirt that would fit right in at any suburban coffee shop. His friendly demeanor and easy smile made him seem more like an insurance adjuster than someone who specialized in uncovering fraud. That's the point, he explained, as Linda made coffee. People tell me things they'd never tell someone who looks like they stepped out of a detective novel. Sarah spread the printed emails and security footage, screenshots across her kitchen table. So what do you think? Are we dealing with harassment or something more serious? Marcus studied the materials with the careful attention of someone who'd seen every variation of neighbor disputes and insurance scams. This is sophisticated. The doctored photos, the strategic timing, the use of official channels to legitimize the complaints. Someone's done this before. That's what we thought, Linda said. Can you find out if the Whitfields have a history of this kind of thing? Already started. Marcus pulled out his tablet and showed them a preliminary report. Richard Whitfield has filed 17 complaints with various city departments over the past 5 years. Building code violations, noise ordinances, property maintenance issues, all against different neighbors. Sarah felt her stomach drop. 17. And here's the interesting part in 12 of those cases. The neighbors either moved away within 6 months or made substantial changes to their properties to comply with his demands. Marcus swiped to another screen. I found similar patterns in their previous neighborhood before they moved here. Jesus, Linda muttered. They're professional bullies. But this case is different, Marcus continued. The manufactured evidence, the insurance fraud setup, that's a significant escalation. They're not just trying to force compliance anymore. They're trying to destroy you. Sarah checked her watch. She had to leave for the police station in an hour. What can we do? First, we document everything. I've already set up surveillance on their property, legal surveillance from public areas. If they're planning to stage property damage, we'll catch them in the act. Marcus handed Sarah a small device. This is a GPS tracker for your car. If things escalate, we want to know exactly where you are at all times. You think they'd try? To hurt me physically? I think desperate people do desperate things. And according to the financial records I was able to access, the Whitfields are beyond desperate. Marcus's expression grew serious. They've got less than 30 days before they default on their second mortgage. If they don't sell that house soon, they'll lose everything. The weight of that information settled over Sarah like a blanket. She'd been thinking of this as a neighborhood dispute, but it was really about survival, both hers and theirs. There's something else, Marcus said. I contacted 3 of the neighbors who had previous run-ins with the Whitfields. 2 of them refused to talk, but the third woman, named Dorothy Valdez, agreed to meet with us this afternoon. What happened to her? She tried to add a mother-in-law suite to her backyard. The Whitfields complained about everything from the permit process to the construction noise. What started as normal neighbor complaints escalated into allegations of illegal electrical work and building code violations. Linda leaned forward. Did she finish the project? No. After 6 months of legal battles and thousands in legal fees, she abandoned the project and moved out of state. Sold her house at a significant loss. Marcus's jaw tightened. But here's the kicker. 2 weeks after she moved, the new owners completed the exact same project without a single complaint from the Whitfields. Sarah felt sick because the new owners were the kind of people who fit their vision of the neighborhood. Exactly. Young, professional couple, dual income, no kids. They finished Dorothy's project and added another $100,000 to the property value. Marcus closed his tablet. The Whitfields didn't just want to stop the construction, they wanted to force out someone they saw as undesirable. And now they're trying to force out Sarah, Linda said. Marcus nodded. But this time, they've made a mistake. They've escalated to manufacturing evidence and making threats. That's criminal behavior, and it gives us options. Sarah's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Detective appointment at 10. Remember, accidents happen to people who don't listen. Marcus examined the message. They're monitoring your communications. Are you using the phone I gave you for sensitive conversations? Yes, but how would they know about the detective? Appointment. Either they have someone at the police department, or, Marcus paused, thinking, or they made the complaint themselves. The detective called you last night, right after the police left. That's awfully fast for a separate complaint to work its way through the system. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. They called in the fraud allegation while the officers were still here. Karen was probably on the phone with someone while I was talking to the police. Which means the detective interview isn't just about clearing up a misunderstanding, Linda said. It's part of their plan. Marcus stood up. Sarah, I need you to be very careful at that interview. Don't volunteer any information beyond what they specifically ask. If they show you evidence, examine it carefully. If they're using doctored photos or manufactured documents, there will be inconsistencies. Sarah felt overwhelmed. What if they arrest me? They won't, not yet. They're fishing for information, trying to get you to say something that supports their narrative. Marcus handed her a business card. If things go south, call this number immediately. It's a criminal defense attorney who specializes in false allegations. After Marcus left to set up his surveillance equipment, Sarah and Linda sat in the kitchen trying to process everything they'd learned. The scope of the Whitfields' manipulation was staggering. They'd turned harassment into an art form, using official channels and social pressure to force out anyone who didn't meet their standards. I keep thinking about Dorothy Valdez, Sarah said. What if I hadn't found that security camera footage? What if I'd just accepted that Karen was a concerned neighbor? But you did find it, Linda said firmly, and now we know what we're dealing with. Sarah's landline rang, startling them both. The caller ID showed her principal's office. Sarah, it's Janet. I hate to bother you at home, but I received a very concerning call this morning. Sarah's heart sank. What kind of call? Someone claiming to be from the county fraud investigation unit. They're asking about your employment status, your financial situation, whether you've seemed stressed or desperate lately. Janet's voice was carefully neutral. I told them I'd need to see official documentation before discussing any employee's personal information. Janet, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything to me. But, Sarah, if you're having problems, please know that you have support here. Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out together. After hanging up, Sarah stared at the phone in horror. They're going after my job now. Linda's face was grim. They're trying to destroy your entire life. Job, home, reputation, everything. Why? Sarah's voice broke. I'm just trying to remove a pool from my own backyard. Why is that worth destroying? Someone's life. Before Linda could answer, Sarah's cell phone rang. It was Marcus. Sarah, you need to get out of your house right now. I'm watching the Whitfields' place, and a utility truck just pulled up. 3 men got out, with shovels and some kind of equipment. What kind of equipment? The kind that might be used to create a water line break? If I'm right, they're about to flood their own basement and blame it on your pool demolition. Sarah felt the room spinning around her. But I haven't even touched the pool since yesterday. How can they blame water damage on work that isn't happening? Because by the time the investigation is complete, the timeline won't matter. All that will matter is that there was active pool demolition, and then there was water damage. The insurance company will pay the claim, and you'll be left holding the bag for fraud. Linda was already grabbing her keys. We're leaving now. Wait, Marcus said. I need you to do something first. Go to your backyard and take photos of everything, the current state of the demolition, the positioning of your equipment, everything. Timestamp them with today's date, if they're staging a water break. We need proof of what your property looked like before their accident. Sarah and Linda rushed to the backyard, Sarah's hands shaking as she photographed every angle of the partially demolished pool. The work lights were still set up from the night before, the pump still humming as it drew the last of the water from the deep end. There, Linda said, pointing to the fence line. Do you see that? Sarah looked where Linda was pointing and felt her blood run cold. Someone had dug a small hole near the base of the fence on the Whitfields. A hole that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. They're creating a path for water to flow from their property to yours, Linda said. When their pipe accidentally breaks, the water will flow right through that hole and make it look like it came from your demolition. Sarah photographed the hole from multiple angles, her mind racing. We have to stop them. No, Marcus's voice came through the phone speaker. We have to let them do it, and we have to catch them in the act. This is their mistake, Sarah. They're about to commit a felony, and we're going to have it all on video. Sarah looked at the half-destroyed pool, the equipment that represented her last. Detective Castellanos was younger than Sarah had expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a demeanor that suggested he'd heard every sob story and excuse in the book. His office at the county sheriff's department was sterile and intimidating, designed to make people uncomfortable enough to tell the truth, or at least what they thought was the truth. Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for coming in voluntarily. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. I understand you've been doing some construction work at your residence. Sarah had rehearsed this moment with Marcus, but sitting in the harsh Fluorescent lighting with the detective's unwavering gaze made her mouth go dry. "I'm removing my pool. It's become too expensive to maintain, and you obtained the proper permits for this work." "I was told by the city that I didn't need permits for pool removal, only installation." Sarah kept her voice steady. "I called the building department to verify." Detective Castellanos consulted his notes. "We have no record of that call in the system. Are you sure you spoke with someone official?" Sarah felt the first prickle of unease. "I spoke with someone who answered the phone at the building department. I didn't get their name." The detective made a note. "Mrs. Mitchell, we've received allegations that you've been planning to file a fraudulent insurance claim related to water damage from your pool demolition. Do you have homeowners insurance?" "Of course I do. It's required for my mortgage." Sarah's heart was pounding. "But I haven't filed any claims. I don't understand what this is about." The detective pulled out a folder and removed several photographs. Sarah's breath caught. They were the same doctored images from the anonymous email, showing her backyard with fake flooding and water damage. "Do you recognize these photos, Mrs. Mitchell?" Sarah studied them carefully, remembering Marcus's advice to examine any evidence closely. "These are photos of my backyard, but the water damage shown here isn't real. Someone has digitally altered these images." "You're saying these photos are fake?" "I'm saying someone has manipulated them to make it look like there's flooding that doesn't exist." Sarah pointed to specific areas. "Look at the shadows here. They don't match the lighting in the rest of the photos. And this water stain pattern is physically impossible given the slope of my yard." Detective Castellanos studied the photos with renewed interest. "You seem to know a lot about photo manipulation." "I teach high school English, but I also supervise the yearbook committee. We work with digital photography every day." Sarah felt more confident now. These images have definitely been altered. Before the detective could respond, his phone rang. He answered it with a curt "Castellanos," then listened for several minutes, his expression growing more serious. "I see how much water. When did it start?" He made rapid notes. "We'll be right there." He hung up and looked at Sarah with a mixture of suspicion and confusion. "Mrs. Mitchell, there's been a significant water main break on your street. The Whitfield residence has sustained major flooding to their basement." Sarah's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope everyone is okay. The timing is quite coincidental, don't you think? We're here discussing potential water damage from your property, and suddenly your neighbors are dealing with actual flooding. Detective, I've been sitting in this office with you for the past 30 minutes. How could I be responsible for a water main break?" He studied her face carefully. "We'll need to investigate the scene. I'm going to ask you to accompany me to your neighborhood." During the drive back to her street, Sarah sent a discreet text to Marcus using the secure phone. "It's happening. Heading to scene with detective." His response was immediate. "Perfect. Everything is being recorded. Stay calm." Sarah's street was chaos when they arrived. 2 fire trucks, an ambulance, and multiple police cars lined the road. County Water Department vehicles blocked the intersection, and neighbors stood in clusters on their lawns, watching the drama unfold. The source of the commotion was immediately obvious. Water gushed from a broken main in the street directly in front of the Whitfield house, creating a river that flowed down the slight incline toward the storm drains. The Whitfields stood on their front lawn, Karen in tears as she spoke animatedly to a fire chief. "Oh, Detective Castellanos, thank goodness you're here." Karen rushed toward them, her perfectly styled hair somehow still perfect despite the crisis. "This is a disaster. Our basement is completely flooded." Richard Whitfield approached more slowly, his face grim. "The water main must have been weakened by all the demolition vibrations from next door. Our foundation contractor warned us this might happen." Sarah felt Detective Castellanos' eyes on her, gauging her reaction. She forced herself to remain calm while her mind raced. The Whitfields were playing their parts perfectly, the devastated homeowners whose property had been damaged by their neighbor's reckless construction. "When did the break occur?" the detective asked. "About 20 minutes ago," Richard said. "I was in my home office when I heard this enormous cracking sound. By the time I got outside, water was everywhere. We tried to call the water department immediately," Karen added, "but the damage was already done." Thousands of dollars in damage to our basement, all because someone couldn't follow proper procedures for construction. A water department supervisor approached them. Detective, we've isolated the break. Looks like the main was compromised by external pressure, possibly from construction vibrations or heavy equipment. Sarah watched Karen's face carefully and caught the tiniest flicker of satisfaction. They'd planned this perfectly, down to having an official explanation ready. I'd like to inspect both properties, Detective Castellano said. Mrs. Mitchell, we'll start with your backyard. As they walked toward Sarah's house, she noticed Marcus's surveillance van parked discreetly down the street. She also noticed something the detective hadn't: wet footprints leading from the Whitfield's yard to the street, but in the wrong direction. If Richard had discovered the break and rushed outside to investigate, the footprints should lead from the house to the street. Instead, they led from the street to the house. Someone had been at the break site before the water started flowing. Detective Sarah said quietly, I'd like to point out something about the timeline here. What's that? You said the break happened 20 minutes ago while we were in your office. But look at the Whitfields there, both completely dry. If their basement flooded that quickly and they were dealing with the emergency, shouldn't they show some signs of having been in contact with the water? Detective Castellanos studied the Whitfields more carefully. Karen's expensive shoes showed no water damage. Richard's clothes were pristine. For people who'd just discovered a basement flood, they looked remarkably composed and clean. In Sarah's backyard, the detective examined the pool demolition site carefully. The equipment sat exactly where Sarah had left it, the pump still running. To drain the remaining water, there was no sign of any recent work that could have caused ground vibrations. Mrs. Mitchell, when was the last time you operated heavy equipment back here? Yesterday evening, before the police arrived. I haven't touched anything since then because the officers told me to stop work until I had proper documentation. The detective made notes, then walked to the fence line. Sarah held her breath as he approached the area where she'd photographed the suspicious hole. But when he looked over the fence, she saw something that made her stomach drop. The hole was gone. The Whitfields had filled it in. Detective, a crime scene technician, called from the street. You need to see this. They walked back to the water main break, where the technician was examining the damaged pipe. This wasn't caused by external pressure or vibrations, he said. Look at the break pattern. This pipe was deliberately weakened with a cutting tool. Then pressure was applied to make it fail. Detective Castellanos' expression sharpened. You're saying this was sabotage, without question. Someone cut partway through this main, then used leverage to snap it. This was intentional. Sarah felt a surge of vindication, but Detective Castellanos was studying her with renewed suspicion. Mrs. Mitchell, do you have access to pipe cutting tools? No, detective. I don't even own basic plumbing tools. Sarah's voice remained steady. But I do have something that might interest you. She pulled out her phone and showed him the time-stamped photos she'd taken of her backyard that morning, including clear images of the hole that had been dug near the fence line. These were taken at 7:47 this morning, 3 hours before the water main break. Notice the excavation near the fence. That hole isn't there anymore. The detective studied the photos carefully. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that someone dug that hole to channel water from their property to mine, making it look like the flooding came from my pool demolition. When their plan changed to a street-side water main break, they filled in the evidence. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, detective. It's an observation. The evidence speaks for itself. Detective Castellanos looked from the photos to the fence line, then back to the Whitfields, who were still speaking with the fire chief. Sarah could see him processing the inconsistencies, the tuck-lean victims, the suspicious timing, the deliberately sabotaged water main. Mrs. Mitchell,